Does Ohio State's blowout win over Oregon vindicate Tennessee? For those who didn't see the game yesterday, Ohio State beat Oregon 41-21 in a game that honestly wasn't even that close. I think a lot of people thought this was a possibility after the way Ohio State barely lost to Oregon in the regular season. It was a 32-31 loss in which Will Howard had a bad play towards the end, and people really felt that if Ohio State, given the talent they had, played up to their talent under Ryan Day, that they could blow out anybody, and they were the more talented team than Oregon, and they really showed that in this game. They're obviously a team on a mission, given what happened with their loss to Michigan. Also, Michigan may just be a significantly better team at this point, given how Michigan, they, I guess, shall we say, beat Alabama and Ohio State to close out the year. Great story. Alabama lost to Michigan twice this year on January the 1st, 2024, and December the 31st, 2024. On the first and last day of 2024, Alabama lost to Michigan. Also, Kalen DeBoer lost to Michigan twice in the year. But anyways, the point I'm getting at is Ohio State's blowout of Oregon, does that vindicate Tennessee? Well, in all honesty, I don't think Tennessee had to be vindicated, because my point is I didn't think this 12-team college football playoff was necessary to begin with. I told you guys from the start that the 12-team playoff was not going to help the smaller little guy teams the way everybody thought, like SMU and Boise State and teams like that. I said what it was going to do was help the bigger teams that have a lot of talent that now get more mulligans than they used to get with a chance to go win a national title because of the 12-team playoff. Ohio State is the team that benefits the most from that. I warned you guys that was going to happen, and people really thought this expanded playoff was going to be a check on teams like Ohio State. It's the exact opposite. It's an extra benefit for them. It gives them more mulligans in the regular season. So I don't think Tennessee had to be vindicated from the start, because I don't think anybody was going to question that Oregon was in the playoff, that Oregon belonged in the playoff, and they were 13-0 and got blown out. And there are teams all the time that get blown out in the playoff, whether or not it's a 14-team playoff or a 2-team playoff. So Tennessee didn't need to get vindicated from the start. But yes, to a certain degree, it still does vindicate them, because there were questions over whether or not they belonged. But the point of the matter is every team in the lower end of the college football playoff rankings this year was deeply flawed, okay? And included in that was Tennessee. This is what we warned about with the playoff expanding to 12 teams. By the way, I got to send a really big shout out to the Rose Bowl. Josh Payne and I seem to be the only people who agree on this. Respect to the Rose Bowl for refusing to kowtow to college football corporate czars, okay? In this era of an expanded playoff, of trying to devalue bowl games, of trying to do all this stuff that messes with tradition, the Rose Bowl says no. They refuse to move their bowl game off New Year's Day. This is the same bowl game company that back in the 90s refused to take part of the Bowl Coalition, refused to take part in the Bowl Alliance, left profits on the table because they were concerned about the future of college football, and they were very weary of college football becoming what it's become. So major shout out to the Rose Bowl, because as you guys saw, they refused to wait for Texas, Arizona State to end before they went ahead and started their own game. That is awesome. I love that about the Rose Bowl. Dylan says they need to make the Rose Bowl the annual national championship. Dylan, see, the problem with that is the Rose Bowl would refuse to be in the national championship because they don't want to move past New Year's Day. I love them for that. I think they should just play the extra game at the Rose Bowl, though. I'll give you that. So major shout out to the Rose Bowl for that. But in general, was Tennessee vindicated by Ohio State? Maybe. But what I will say is that Tennessee being vindicated by Ohio State, I think that has more to do with Tennessee, more to do with the fact that we ignored the fact that the bottom teams of the college football playoff were all deeply flawed, and it was going to allow for national title caliber teams like Ohio State, who didn't do what they should have done in the regular season, to come around and have a chance to play for the national title. This was how the college football playoff was going to work out. The show represented by Banks & Jones, tscottjones.com. Banks & Jones, your trial attorney. Remember, play to win, banksandjones.com. In just a minute, we will talk a little bit more about this Rose Bowl game.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones.
Welcome back to Off the Hook Sports. I wanted to bring up the show brought to you by Chattanooga Mortgage. Congratulations, your home search just got easier. Buying a home in Chattanooga has never been easier. Chatmortgage.com, chat with two T's, mortgage.com, chat with two T's, mortgage.com. So getting back to the point, talking a little bit about this Ohio State Oregon game and the college football playoff. I think that, again, I don't think anybody ever, one of the ridiculous things people do just in general is use hindsight to say that, well, that proves this team shouldn't have been in or that proves this team should have been in. That's always a dumb way to look at things because you can only go based off the criteria that's in front of you, okay? Now, I have used that this year in the college football playoff to derail and trash the expanded playoff because of so many blowouts. But I don't think that means the wrong teams all got in. I think it means that there were too many teams getting in. I do think that Ohio State's win over Oregon, we were talking about how it vindicated Tennessee in the Rose Bowl. And I think that there's a few ways to look at Ohio State in this regard. I think that Ohio State, I think they're on a mission. I do. I think they are one of the two most talented teams in the college football playoff right now. Look, even in this era of NIL and the transfer portal, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama are head and shoulders above the rest of the field in college football. Now, many of you will say that means Kalen DeBoer should be fired because he couldn't even get into the playoff and they went 9-4. We're going to talk about this later. Jalen Miller is an absolute abysmal fit for Alabama's offense. And Kalen DeBoer was in his first year. He's got to address some things there. I don't know. He's not in good news if Jalen Miller comes back. But Ohio State themselves, I think, is, again, they are just loaded with talent. And if they actually have their heads screwed on right, they can dominate. So what I think happened with Ohio State, they lost at Oregon in the regular season, nothing to be ashamed of. It was at Oregon. It was a close game. They lost 32-31. The loss at Michigan at the end of the year, Ohio State was in the playoff. They pretty much knew they had already secured a home game in the playoff. So in all honesty, I don't think they took that. I know it's Michigan. I know it's a rivalry, but I think there's a very good chance Michigan took that game a lot more seriously than Ohio State. And even though it's the game, it's the big game, it's the game of college football, I think Michigan played with a little more oomph because it was their national title pretty much. And Ohio State had bigger fish to fry with the college football playoff and was thinking about their seeding. I think that distraction allowed Michigan to win because Michigan is much more talented than their 6-5 record indicated. Hence the reason they could beat Ohio State and then beat Alabama. Michigan honestly has the best resume of any 8-5 program in college football history. So I think Ohio State was a little bit underrated going into this playoff. We knew they were loaded talent-wise. Ryan Day was on the hot seat. A humble Ohio State that has a determination to win for a head coach the players love was going to be unbeatable. And that happened with Tennessee, where they broke Tennessee's will early. Plus, Tennessee had Dylan Sampson get hurt in the first drive of the game offensively. Defensively, they had a penalty that kept an Ohio State drive alive. That just killed their momentum before it could ever get off the ground. And then comes the Oregon game. And the Oregon game was just an absolute catastrophe for the Ducks. Very much proving that Ohio State was the significantly superior team talent-wise. And I'll be honest, I think Ohio State is – I'm not even sure that means they're going to win it because Ohio State has a tendency to choke. And I'm not sure this vindicates Ryan Day. But it does vindicate Tennessee because I think Ohio State is that much better than the field talent-wise except for Georgia. And so I think that's a really, really, really big deal, honestly. So we're going to keep tabs on that. And so that's our wrap-up of Ohio State, Oregon, and the Rose Bowl. And we finally have Dave Hooker hopping on. Let's get him in. Dave, you there?
Yes. New Year's comes fruit with, and you've split me back around. I'll flip me around. New Year's comes fruit with new challenges. How about that? As we welcome you to 2025, hit the like and subscribe button. My apologies. The show represented by Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Do you want to reset the receiver conversation since I got knocked off, or do you just want to continue it with the news that I have? And your magic editing skills can work.
Let's continue it, and my magic editing skills will take over. I just want to let you know we have covered Ohio State. Just before we do that, I wanted to know your thoughts real quick because we covered this topic. Does Ohio State's blowout win over Oregon vindicate Tennessee, or do you think Tennessee even needed to be vindicated?
I think it vindicated them, but I think there are clearly two different tiers right now that are in the college football playoff. And I think you'd agree with this. There are about 4 or 5 teams that ultimately belong. And I think there'll be another tier of a Georgia and Ohio State. But to answer your question, yes. I think the question, too, that we have to ask ourselves is where's Tennessee on that tier? Are they on the second tier knocking at the door for championship tier? Or are they on the third tier just kind of hoping to take that next step? You look at the season, 10 wins in the SEC, but then you look at how they performed in the playoffs. That wasn't very impressive, Caleb.
No, it was not. But, I told people this beforehand. I think all of us overlooked Ohio State with their loss to Michigan. I think you and I would agree on this. Despite Alabama's struggles, Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia, just pure talent-wise, were better than the rest of the field in college football still. So when you get to the college football playoff, I think Georgia and Ohio State are just, even in this NIL age, I think Georgia and Ohio State, wouldn't you say, are still kind of lapping the field in talent?
Yes, I believe that to be the case. I think Tennessee is unfortunate in the fact that Kirby Smart is the better coach between the two, and he happens to be in the SEC, and he's the team that you've got to beat. But as far as talent-wise, I wouldn't argue with that. I think they're the 2 most talented teams in the SEC. I want to take a pick at the...
In the CFP, you mean?
I'm sorry, what did I say?
In the college football playoff, you mean?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly. So I remind you of the show represented by Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. As we go to the message board, brought to you by our good friends at City Heating and Air Conditioning, City Heat and Air, 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters. So I take a look at the chat board, and Bender of Strings thinks we are high-class mediocrity right now. That accurate? It's a good call. I want to say more along the lines of high class goodness. Like a little better than mediocre, but not great.
I had Tennessee winning it all because of a combination of Nico Iamaleava, Josh Heupel, and team chemistry. The chemistry couldn't outweigh the talent of Ohio State, and I think Ohio State really came together for this playoff. And I think even you would have said, Dave, at the beginning of the year, you would have said, if Georgia and Ohio State play together as a team and have great chemistry, there's nobody in the world that can beat those 2 teams.
Agreed. Now, I take that back. I think somebody could outsmart Ryan Day.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
But not a lot of teams, just 2 or 3 that are close to that. I mean, you can't be Vanderbilt and outsmart Ryan Day and win. No,
you can't. That's a great point. Yeah. And, yeah, I think they've had such a perfect game plan 2 games in a row. And also, it felt like Dan Lanning was quitting on yesterday's game. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, Dave, but there were 4 minutes left. They were down 41-21, and he punted. And I'm like, okay, I know you're pretty much lost, but theoretically, you could maybe mathematically have a lucky comeback at 41-21, right? With 4 minutes left. You don't punt that.